Now, Donald Trump said the U.S. has a large military force heading towards Iran and is watching the country very closely. The U.S. president made the comments aboard Air Force One as he returned from Europe after attending the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now, Trump said the United States has sent an Armada towards Iran, but hoped he would not have to use it as he renewed the warnings to Tehran against killing protesters or restarting its nuclear program. He also confirmed he is open to talking with Iran.
We have a big force going toward Iran. I'd rather not see anything happen, but we're watching them very closely. I stopped 837 hangings on Thursday, and I said, if you hang those people, you're going to be hit harder than you've ever been hit. It'll make what we did to your Iran nuclear look like peanuts. But we have an Armada. We have a massive fleet heading in that direction. And maybe we won't have to use it. We'll see.
And according to reports citing U.S. officials, the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln has several guided missile destroyers, and that will arrive in West Asia in the coming days. U.S. warships and fighter aircraft started moving from the Asia-Pacific last week as tensions between Iran and the United States soared. Now, one official reportedly said additional air defense systems were also being eyed for West Asia, which could be critical to guard against any Iranian strike on U.S. bases in the region. While Trump has repeatedly threatened to intervene against Iran over the recent killings of protesters. But protests dwindled last week, and the U.S. president backed away from his rhetoric last week, claiming he had stopped executions of prisoners. On Wednesday, the Indian authorities gave their first official toll from the protests, saying 3,117 people were killed, while rights groups say the actual number of dead could be far higher. Now, Trump has repeatedly left open the option of a new military action against Iran after Washington backed and joined Israel's 12-day war in June last year, aimed at degrading the Islamic Republic's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Meanwhile, Iran's Revolutionary Guards commander, General Mohammad Baghpour, warned the U.S. and said that U.S. and Israel to avoid miscalculations, saying the force has its finger on the trigger and is ready to act. His comments marked the National Day in Iran to celebrate the Guards as well. All right, to discuss more, we're now being joined by Chris Doyle, Director and current lead spokesperson for Council for Arab-British Understanding. He's a West Asia analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Now, let's begin with a report that is circulating, the movement of large U.S. naval armada towards Iran. How serious do you think, or how do you observe these movements from U.S.?
Well, I think that during the protests, which were at their height, of course, in the last few weeks that have somewhat calmed down now, I think one of the things that held the US back from not taking action was the fact that they did not have an aircraft carrier group in the vicinity. I think Donald Trump is moving the assets. He's trying to demonstrate that the US has strength. But it still leaves a huge question mark here, really. If the United States did actually order military action on Iran somehow to help those protests, what targets would be hit? What exactly would it achieve? By hitting Iran doesn't necessarily mean that the Iranian regime would fall. It begs questions as to what the overall ambition, objective of any such military action would be. But as ever with President Trump, none of this is particularly clear. But when you move large forces like that into the region, of course, it does escalate the chances that there will be some form of military action going forward.
And we talk about what the objectives. The nuclear issue remains central to U.S. and Iran relations. Do you think the U.S. will pick that topic, and will Iran agree to start these talks? Because considering the remarks from Trump, he said that he's warned against that he will not renew because there are no killings against the protesters, there's no killing and there's no execution, but he would restart it if it comes to a nuclear program.
Well, underneath all of this, there's got to be some sort of political dynamic, hopefully leading to agreement on the nuclear issue, but also other files as well. Those who hope that the Iranian regime will somehow fall may be disappointed. And of course, after killing thousands of protesters behaving brutally, that's really very understandable. But, carrying out regime change is something that I think Donald Trump is averse to. I think he would be far more keen to get to negotiations than to try to claim a diplomatic victory, that it's his peace through strength that has compelled the Iranian regime to come to the negotiations table. Iran, obviously, the regime is in a very precarious situation at the moment. So I think Trump will hope that in that weakness, that regime will try to save itself through some form of a deal. Now, that's going to leave those protesters looking for a different Iran, rather isolated and left high and dry.
But considering that, we have reports that say that the protests have dwindled and, we don't see any fresh report of protest and that everything has calmed down, that they have called down the executions. Why now, then?
Well, I think he's looking Trump for this political victory. And those protests have dwindled at the moment, but probably because of the utter ferocity of the Iranian regime crackdown on them when they took down the internet. So there's a lull. It doesn't mean that they're not going to kick off again. But I think that Trump sees there's an opportunity in Iran to try to claim some great diplomatic prize. I think that there's a long way to go before we can really talk about anything in that regard. There's no deal on the nuclear talks. Those protests were viciously dealt with, thousands of Iranians killed, and there's, quite possibly another chance that those protests will kick off again at some point.
And do you think that would influence anything in the regional area? Because considering the fact that if at all there is the military and if US is sending an Armada, clearly they're of course securing the US bases in and around Iran. Not really and how about Israel? How are the regional countries looking at this?
This will escalate the tensions, and we've seen already various countries change their travel advice in terms of going to the region. Everybody will be paying very, very close attention to this. This will impact, most of the countries of the region. There were many Arab states that were very nervous about any US move to hit Iran. I think that they fear regime collapse and the upheaval that would cause, because if you get, the regime collapsing in some form or way, Iran is a country that could implode. It's got many different communities, ethnicities, and sects, and that will definitely have an impact on the region, including, refugee flows, instability, and the like. So whatever President Trump decides to do, those actors like Saudi Arabia and others will be trying to press on him to get deals rather than go to war and create a situation. Really would be hard to predict the outcome.
Right. And taking the decision of sending an Armada, of course, is not a little one, considering the fact that, they're moving these Navy in the region. Of course, we'll have to wait and see what kind of decision Trump says, because he's someone who's really unpredictable. But thank you so much for joining on the broadcast and giving your insight.
Thank you for having me.